Hello and welcome to the podcast to be named later. We are recording this without a name decided on, but we are going to be covering some Washington State sports. This is Greg Woods, WSU beat writer for the Spokesman Review, joined by Jamey of Coug Fan, and his title is none other than Palouse Bureau Chief, which I have to make sure I get right because that sounds very official. And he deserves it. He's awesome. But thanks for listening. We, this is what the world really needs is another podcast by two dudes. So that's what's going on here. This is episode 1, and with the WSU season right around the corner, starting on Saturday against Idaho at 7 p.m., we thought this would be a good time to kick this off. A little bit of housekeeping just to get this out of the way. I think moving forward, we're going to get on a weekly schedule of posting these on Mondays. That way we'll have time to kind of digest the previous game. And then on Mondays, head coach Jimmy Rogers will do his weekly press conference that afternoon. So that'll give us time to hear from him and give you guys a little bit more context in terms of what he thinks, any injury updates, and kind of what he thinks of the upcoming opponent. So look for those on Mondays moving forward. I know this is kind of confusing coming out on a Thursday or Friday, but that is what to expect moving forward. Going into week 1, we have the Cougs and Vandals squaring off. I think the line opened at 13.5 for WSU. I'm not sure where it is right now, but that was the opening line. I think what's on everybody's mind is who the starting quarterback will be, and it could be any. They want us to think that it could be any 4 of the guys between returners Zevi Eckhouse and Jackson Potter, and then Pitt transfer Julian Duggar, and Rutgers transfer Ajani Shepard. And those 4 have been in a 4-way quarterback battle ever since the start of fall camp, which was the end of July. So if they have it the way they want it, we will all be finding out, at least outside of the team, we will all be finding out the starting quarterback when they first jog out there for the first snap. So what I want to do, to kind of start off the conversation here, Jamey, I'm going to count down to 3, and on 3, we're both going to say the name of the guy we think is going to start. And hopefully this will illustrate where we are at in terms of the beat writers that are on the ground every day covering them. Okay, so here we go. Ready? All right, 1, 2, 3.
Zevi Eckhouse.
All right, there we go. That's kind of where I thought we were. I have my own thoughts, but I've been kind of yapping for a little bit. So, Jamey, tell me a little bit of your thoughts on why you think it'll be Zevi in the end.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Zevi, I think you look at the leadership, you look at the experience, a 3-year starter at Bryant, and, just from what we observed in fall camp, when they went live on the quarterbacks, which was obviously something that was a little surprising, something we haven't seen at Washington State in a long time, you could tell who had played multiple years of college football, who had started more than just 1 or 2 games, and really who was able to handle the pressure, who was able to withstand when, the thought of being hit. And I think Zevi looked the best in those reps. I think you look at just maybe kind of the experience he has and the relationships he has with his teammates, just from having been here a year. I think when you put those together and the fact that, he's again, the experience, he's the oldest guy of the group. You like the leadership. You like just kind of the IQ and the intelligence. And in an offense that really is centered around getting the ball to the playmakers, getting it to Angel Johnson, getting it to your receivers, to your tight ends, I think he's the best candidate for that. And some of that just comes down to the fact that he's been around college football for so long. He has a pretty good feel of what it takes to win games and what it takes to be successful as a college quarterback.
And I think if I could add to that, I think what the coaches signal in getting Shepard and Duggar out of the portal was that they value a mobile quarterback. And I think what Zevi has shown through fall camp is that he might not be the traditional dual threat kind of guy that those guys are, but he is plenty mobile himself. I think if he could play the way he wanted to play, he might skew more toward a pocket passer. But as we saw multiple times in fall camp, I mean, he made tons of plays with his legs. I think there was one that comes to mind for me where it was a live rep, which they did on, I think, 3 or 4 different days. And I think it was a design quarterback run, and he just takes it up the middle for a touchdown of 60 or 65 yards. And maybe the job list is at that point, we're not privy to the coach's thinking, obviously, but I think those are the kinds of plays that really cement in coaches' minds. Like, hey, he might not be, our ideal style of quarterback, or we might not have cooked him up in a lab the way we could, but he does the things that we want a quarterback to do. And I think when you combine some of that mobility, the dual threat ability, with the leadership that you mentioned, I think we're in agreement that he will be the guy for all those reasons that we just mentioned. I think he definitely has his teammates' respect. I don't remember him, and this just kind of goes without saying just because it's human nature. I think last fall camp, I don't remember him being like as vocal as he is now. Do you? I feel like that's been a notable change in my mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think part of it last year is he's kind of the new guy. He's still getting to know these guys, and obviously he arrived in time to compete in the spring. But Mateer had been around for a couple of years. He had known a lot of these guys. Zevi was still kind of familiarizing himself not just with the staff but with his teammates. Whereas now, so goes the world of college football. He is one of the more experienced guys on this roster, just in terms of having been here more than a year, more than a few months. So I definitely think you saw more of a vocal side. I think you saw a little bit of a swagger that maybe you didn't see last year. There was a number of dust-ups and, scraps and disagreements in fall camp, and he was oftentimes at the center of it. And he was not afraid to vocalize or verbalize when he made a big play and let the defense know. But, I think that he definitely has some of the moxie and some of the leadership. And, I've always said this, to be a quarterback, you can't be arrogant, but you have to be confident. You have to have some kind of cockiness and some degree of belief in yourself. And that obviously, again, comes out in different ways. I think for Washington State fans, you look at a Gardner Minshew versus a Luke Falk. Obviously, their confidence was very, very different in that Gardner was the big personality. Luke was a lot more just kind of, even-keeled, but both had that confidence and that belief in themselves. I think you saw that last year with John Mateer. I think Zevi is showing more of kind of the Mateer-Minshew swagger, whereas last year was a little more of kind of the Luke Falk, Anthony Gordon, kind of steady, even-keeled confidence, but not like exuberance per se. And I think you've seen that a lot in fall camp, and I think that maybe has helped him kind of come out of his shell and be the better version of himself as a player.
I think they really want that out of all their guys, not just the quarterback spot. Like, from what we saw in fall camp, we wrote about it in our stories, but just, kind of like you mentioned, the number of dust-ups and, literal, punches being thrown a time or two were not something, this is only my third year on the beat. James, you've been here a little longer, but not something we saw very often in the previous 2 years under Jay Thicker. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that is, I think, the coaches had mentioned on multiple occasions, we would much rather have to pull them back than having to kind of get them going and push them in that direction. So, and I think that's how another way that the Zevi has kind of cemented himself, like you said, is just picking up some of that swagger, borderline cockiness. I'm not even saying that in a bad way, because I think you need a little bit of irrational confidence to succeed at this level. So I think when you combine all of that and you see the vocal leadership, you see kind of that side of Zevi come out. I think we are both expecting him to jog out there for the first snap. But I think one thing that we have also talked a lot about is I don't think either of us would be surprised if we saw another quarterback somewhere in the mix, whether it's on Saturday against Idaho or down the road, maybe on the field at the same time, which we saw a couple years ago with Cam Ward and John Mateer. Jamey, in your mind, do you think there is a path to having maybe not a two quarterback system? I don't think they would split the reps the way that Missouri is, for example. But where do you see, if there is a second quarterback getting involved, one, who do you think it is, and how do they kind of mesh those skill sets?
Yeah, I think the Ward Mateer example is kind of what maybe they're going off of a little bit. Obviously, different staff, so on. But I think, as we were saying, Zevi can move, he can get out of the pocket, but that's not necessarily his specialty. You look at Julian Duggar or Johnny Shepard, that is their specialty. So I think you look at Duggar, for example, you're talking about a left-handed quarterback. You're talking about a guy with really good mobility, really good speed, athleticism. There's something in there that you could keep defenses off balance with. Now, how much will they do that? I don't know. But I would think that there will at least be a couple of packages in there where they have a second quarterback and they split Duggar out wide. They have them both in the backfield. Maybe you go them in the backfield and Angel Johnson, keep defenses off balance. But I do think that if they go to one, I think just based on what we saw between Duggar and Shepard in fall camp, I think Duggar would be a little bit ahead. But at the same time, they're also different runners, right? Duggar is speed. He's a motor. He can burn. Shepard's the bigger body, more like, I think he's about 233 pounds. So you kind of look at how John Mateer was used 2 years ago and kind of just as almost like a fullback at times, or even how Oregon State used Jack Coletto as kind of, their switchblade, the Swiss Army knife, the jackhammer. That was the nickname. But I think there could even be a package where you have Duggar and some of the, where you want to go speed with your second quarterback, but you go quarterback power or something needing an inch or two. That may be where Shepard is at his best because he could just plow ahead. Granted, on the flip side of all that, they also have Kirby Voorhees who specializes in that, so maybe you don't need your quarterback doing that, but I definitely think we see 2 quarterbacks, maybe even 3, and who knows, maybe even 4 at times this year if Jimmy Rogers really wants to get creative.
What do you think coaches of Wazoo Pass would think of 4 quarterbacks in the mix at one time? We've joked about Mike Leach rolling over in his grave at some of the tight end usage and things like that. I think it just speaks to just like how quickly, like I think in a lot of fans' minds, especially those who are not really locked into WSU football or just kind of know it from the outside, I think in their mind it's just air raid. Like if you would have asked me when I was in school back in Kansas what I thought of WSU, that would have been the first term that came to mind. If they just throw it all over the yard. But those things can change with a coaching staff, obviously, and I think that's what we've had to internalize since Rogers got hired last winter is that just like the identity can change with just the change of the coaching staff. And I think when you look at kind of what they did at South Dakota State and the archetype of players that they have brought in since he was hired, you kind of get a sense for where the offense is headed. I mean, you just look at guys that they brought in at the quarterback spot, obviously. 2 big body, dual threat quarterbacks in Shepard and Duggar. And then even at other positions too, whether it's Ademola Faye at tight end out of Michigan State. I mean, he's listed like 6'7". Bo Baker, they brought him over from STSU, kind of a similar big body type. I mean, I could go up and down the line in terms of just like the archetype of guys that they brought in. You can see where the offense is trending just based off of the personnel that they obviously value. Let's see. So, yes, I think the one thing with the quarterbacks, and this is a personal kind of anecdote that I can kind of call upon. Back when I was in high school, back at K-State, they had a somewhat of a similar system going on where they had Jake Waters was their QB1 pocket passer. But they also wanted to make room for a guy named Daniel Sams, who was much more in the Julian Duggar, Azani Shepard archetype, where they just are speed and power. But the thing is, it got to a point where if one was in, if Jake Waters was in, you knew they were going to pass. If Sams was in, the other quarterback, you knew it was going to be kind of a wildcat quarterback. They're going to be direct snapping it to him and seeing what he can do. I don't know if there's like a path to I think there is a path to getting around that. I don't think either of the 2 quarterbacks with Shepard and Duggar are so one-dimensional that you put them in and that's all they can do is just run. I think they're much more versatile than that, very multiple. But I think if there is a risk involved in that whole experiment, I think that would be it. Just your offense getting a little stale, a little predictable. And I think that's something to think about. Now, Saturday might come, they might roll those 3 guys out, and I look like an idiot for thinking something like that. But I think that there is a little bit of inherent risk. It might not come to fruition, but I think that is something to think about as well with those guys. Moving on a little bit, let's talk about some of the guys that we think are not being talked about as much that are going to figure more prominently into the offense or defense. The segment I set up was just kind of 3 players for each of us that we think are flying a little bit under the radar. Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
That's all you, champ.
It's all me? Okay. Well, I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder and also go back to my roots. I'm going to go with Carter Pabst, who is a true freshman, wide receiver, Kansas native. He had one of the best individual fall camps that we saw, and if he didn't, I think he had the biggest surprise of an individual fall camp, just in terms of the way I don't think either of us would have thought much of a guy like that going into fall camp, but he gets out there, he's catching everything, a bunch of deep balls from all manner of different quarterbacks, and he's running with the 1s and 2s. I mean, he wasn't buried. Granted, they did mix a lot. There was a lot of guys that probably will not playing with the 1s, for example. But I think once fall camp was over, once it came to the last few practices, he was still in there. He was catching deep touchdowns from Zevier Cows. He was right there, and I think, and he's on the depth chart now. Obviously, the depth chart might not tell you a whole lot, but
I'm on the depth chart.
right. So that is not now. I mean, obviously, I think there's something to be said in terms of the first guys listed at each position. I think we're both in agreement that those will be the guys that start with a couple of exceptions, maybe. But he's on there, and I think neither of us would be surprised if he was out there and caught a few passes on Saturday. All right, who's your first guy?
I'll go Pabst last. Just to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to go with Trillian Sorrell. I mean, he was a guy who, and this is something we talked about, Greg, is right before fall camp. We asked Jimmy all right, who are some true freshmen to kind of look out for? And this is something I asked Jake Dicker this. I think I asked Nick Rolovich this back in 2021. And I think what oftentimes kind of became clear with Dickert is you ask him about true freshmen, he's going to rattle off 9 guys. More times than not, those guys aren't going to play. So we ask Rogers this. He names Trillian Sorrell, and the second guy who we'll get to in a few minutes. But he names Sorrell, and then Sorrell goes out and is arguably one of their best defensive players all fall camp. Now granted, he was probably getting more reps than maybe a Humphrey or a Coulson, partly because they know what they have in those guys. No, I don't expect him to be above those guys. I fully expect Colby Humphrey, Jamori Coulson will be the starting corners. But, I think you see Trillian Sorrell and you just see the length. You see the athleticism. And there was a stretch of time where every single day he was making a play. Whether it was a pick, whether it was a pass breakup, whether it was coming down and stopping the run, he was everywhere on the field. And it got to a point where, you have experience at corner. You've got Coulson, you've got Humphrey, you've got Kyropola, but it became relatively obvious they can't leave this guy off the field. I mean, he got to a point where he was that productive in fall camp where he's got to play. Like there's no other option. So I think he's a guy now. Again, I don't expect him to be the starter. I think you've got Humphrey, you've got Coulson, you've also got another experienced guy, AJ Davis from SMU. But I think you'll see Sorrell, and I think he's the type of guy who Humphrey and Coulson gone after this year to graduation. Although Coulson, I think theoretically could get another year because he played JUCO. He's a guy who I think this time next year we very well could be talking about as a potential starter.
We've talked about this just between our two. Could you believe that he actually? Well, one, it was one thing for Rogers to shout those guys out before fall camp, but last week when you asked him like, "Hey man, like, are there any freshmen you think might not redshirt?" Right away he was like 5 guys. I almost fell over.
I couldn't believe that after he said the 5 guys, unprompted, he then gave the 5 guys. I thought I was going to have to ask and be like, so who are the 5 guys? And he would say, you'll find out on game day. Well, we're still figuring that out. But he was, boom, right away. Sorrell, Kyle Peterson, Sullivan Schlimgen, Pabst, and
Russell.
Demarius Russell, yeah.
Yeah. No, we and maybe this is where we should probably clue listeners in. Jamey Rogers is not really here for anything but football. And I think that's become pretty clear even in the span of, what's it been, like 8 or 9 months since he got here. But in terms of like talking to us after practice, he keeps it pretty down the middle, doesn't really say a whole lot, which is totally his right. We respect that. But that's also the reason why, we, as soon as he walked away, we were like, oh my God, like we couldn't believe that he just rattled those guys off. So that was really informative. And we kind of expected those guys to play anyway. But just the fact that he said those guys outright, named them, and said he had a number in his head right away, 5. And then, like you said, went on to name them. So we were very pleasantly surprised to hear that. But my next guy is actually not one of those guys. That felt like a little bit cheating to me, even though they're going to play. My next guy is Caden Beatty. Speaking of media, this is not really the point that I'm trying to make, but he is an awesome quote. Gave us a bunch of good stuff about coming over from Kent State, and he's from the Virginia area where they have 2 games this season lined up, JMU and Virginia. I feel like he went under the radar, should have gotten picked or kind of, recruited by UVA. Didn't happen, and now he's fired up. But on the field, man, that dude is just a bowling ball. He is a bulldog, whatever metaphor you want to use. I think he is super physical. I don't know if I can name. I mean, I'm not in the weight room watching them, but he has to be one of the strongest guys on the team. And I don't think it's really them up for debate very much. And so I think when you think about all of that, I think when you think about the athleticism, Kent State actually went 0-12 last year. But he got some run.
We call that a University of Washington season out here in Pullman.
Probably couldn't go a whole podcast without some UW dig from Jamey.
No chance.
But regardless of their record, Caden Beatty played a decent amount. I mean, he played about 400 snaps, played in 11 games. So he was in there. And I know, that's maybe a different level of football that he's being pulled up to now. But I think they're going to rotate a lot at DT. That they have like so many guys, and I don't think there's a huge drop off from each guy. Now there's obviously starters. We both expect Max Balloon and Bryson Lamb to earn those 2 starting spots at D tackle. But based on the rotations that they showed us in fall camp, I think they're going to play a lot of guys. And from Beatty to Darian Dalton to Mike Sanjo, as Jimmy Rogers indicated, was out for a little bit at the beginning of fall camp, but it sounds like he will be able to play week 1. I'm probably drawing a blank on someone else, but point is they have a lot of D tackles, a lot of whom they got in the portal in the spring and summer. So, and I think Caden Beatty is going to be right there in the middle, and his strength will be a big. If they become an awesome team at stopping the run, I think he will be a key part in that without a doubt. So that's my second guy. Jamey, do you have a second guy on your mind?
I do, and I'm gonna just make a quick note before I get into my second guy, rather than just name all freshmen, because otherwise I would have done that. I think we almost have gotten to a point where Russell, Peterson, Schlingen, Pabst almost aren't under, and Sorrell for that matter, aren't under the radar because they've been talked about so much.
Right.
So I'm gonna make that note that I'm not gonna mention those as my other 2, but I think all those guys are gonna make an impact. Next guy I'm going to go with, it's going to be Deron Goodman. I think, you look at that safety room and you look at, all right, Tucker Large, Cale Reeder, Matt Durrance. Like, that's kind of your trio, but Goodman was excellent in the fall. I mean, Large was resting a lot of the fall. Rogers kind of said, he's seen Tucker Large. He has seen Cale Reeder. There's only so much he needs to see out of them in camp. Also mentioned Reeder's, have been banged up. This is all stuff Jimmy Rogers has said because, he made it very clear he wants injuries kind of kept on the down low. Doesn't want a lot of info outside of what he says. So this is just stuff he has said. But, Goodman got a lot of opportunities to run with, some of the top defensive guys, and he looked good. He plays fast. He plays physical. It's kind of the Earl Thomas mold, and I'm not comparing him to Earl Thomas in the sense of Earl Thomas is a Hall of Fame caliber safety, but that style of play where he comes down with a lot of speed and a lot of intensity, and he gets to the ball carrier and he hits hard. So I think he's a guy who, how many safeties are they really going to play? I don't know. I mean, there's 6 guys listed. Are they going to play 6 safeties considering how strong that top 3 is? It's hard to say, but I would think he is probably the 4th guy in that group, a little bit ahead of Peterson and Russell, just purely off the experience.
Yeah, I can see that. My second guy, third guy, counting is hard. I was in school for journalism, not math. Third and final guy for me is Gage Jones at linebacker. He is a converted safety, played more DB in high school in the Boise area. Shout out to Eagle, Idaho, where I've covered a game there at my last job. So I've actually been to his hometown. But he's now a linebacker, and I think, especially now, he might not have figured as prominently into the linebacker rotation with a healthy Keith Brown, but obviously he is going to be out for the year with an undisclosed injury, so which forces and we also think Anthony Bolano might have earned that starting role anyway. But now that people are shuffled up in the rotation because of that, I think that's where Gage Jones earns some playing time. Now he's not playing middle linebacker; he's a Sam with Caleb Francel. But I think linebacker is another spot where they've made it pretty clear they want to rotate a lot. And I think Gage Jones is going to figure into that mix pretty prominently. He was responsible for one of the bigger hits, I remember, in fall camp. So he is not afraid to hit. And I think as much as we talk about guys as, the coaches wanting to bring that, not to bring that out of them, but they want players to find, the gray area between going a little too hard, but also, keeping in check. And I think Gage Jones was a guy that towed that line pretty well, I would say. And I think, I think Keil Frankel's going to play a lot. We'll talk about him obviously a little later. But I think if they want a different look at the same position, whereas Frankel is more of the speed type, that's going to be a huge weapon for them, which we will also talk about. But I think if they want a different look at that position, if they want a different, flavor depending on who's in at the time for the opponent, I think he's a guy they will look at for sure. All right, Jamey, third and final guy for yourself, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm going to go. This one's a little unique in the sense that the guy I'm going to say I don't think you're going to see a lot of this year necessarily, but I thought Xavier Thorpe had a masterful fall camp. I think he looked like a completely different player than the guy who was, a pretty green freshman last fall. I think he's, I don't want to say the clear number 2 behind Hilborn because Sone Falialo's in there as well, but Thorpe certainly looked like a guy that when Hilborn graduates at the end of the year, you can potentially count on to be your right tackle next year without having to go into the portal. So he's a guy who, again, I don't think you'll see barring any sort of injury, which, again, hopefully there is none of that. And, but, if there's blowouts or there's scenarios where they want to get him some reps, I think he's a guy who certainly proved that he is ready to get on the field if necessary and that he can be a very good long-term piece for this team.
One of the few class of 24 guys still hanging around. There's not a whole lot of those guys. A lot of them followed Dickert to Wake Forest. So he's hanging around, and like Jamey mentioned, I think he will be a staple in the years to come because there will be a day, this does not sound like something that makes sense, but there will be a day where Christian Hilborn is not playing for Washington State. It's been, a long 4 or 5 years, but he is in his last year of eligibility. So Thorpe's time is coming. All right, we're going to move on now to a little bit of game talk coming up, talking about Idaho, which was picked to finish 5th of 12 teams in the Big Sky, ranked number 12 in the preseason FCS Top 25 Stats Perform poll. They were placing a lot, including their head coach, Jason Eck, who is now at New Mexico, took a lot of those guys to Albuquerque. The Vandals' new head coach is Thomas Ford, who was their running backs coach in 2023. Spent 1 year as the Oregon State running backs coach, and now he's back. He's back in Moscow, and he has named a starting quarterback, unlike WSU. That is going to be Joshua Wood, a transfer from Fresno State, where he redshirted in 23, was also injured that year, and then played in the Bulldogs Bowl game last year in Boise against Northern Illinois. And looked pretty good in terms of the numbers, in terms of the film, and we will get into that for sure. But that's kind of the scout on Idaho. They're bringing a lot back, but they're also replacing a lot, especially on defense. So I think with Idaho, I think the thing that comes to mind for me, first of all, is just defending Joshua Wood. He is a dual threat guy, super athletic. I watched some of the bowl game last night that he played in, and he looked good, man. I think he's comfortable in the pocket a lot more than you might expect for a guy that was playing in his real first, meaningful college action. Did not seem, bothered by pressure on the pocket, was comfortable stepping up when he needed to, and made some, accurate passes in even those types of situations. So I think he is definitely can hurt you in a lot of different ways, which we say for a lot of dual threat quarterbacks. But that was also a pretty big bugaboo for last season's Cougs. Just thinking about guys from New Mexico and Devin Dampier and guys I'm drawing a blank on right now. But that was a big struggle in terms of tackling last year. Those types of guys. Jamey, what do you think is the key? And I'll chime in after this, but some of the keys to slowing down their offense on Saturday.
Yeah, I think having a spy is going to be the big thing. I think, one of the problems last year is with 2 linebackers, you don't necessarily have the luxury of spying, and that was what happened with Dampier, and even going back to some of the mobile quarterbacks who used to torch the Leach defenses or the Alex Grinch defenses, and because Leach and defense didn't go hand in hand very much, but I think back to Khalil Tate, I think back to Kevin Hogan, I think back to Kieran McDonough, the Portland State quarterback in 2015, and the problems they would cause. So I think when you look at this matchup, I think Caleb Franzel is going to be a key. I think he is there. Obviously, his speed is his weapon. That's his power. That's why at 200 pounds he's able to play linebacker, is because he's so fast. His job is going to likely be some mix of, your job is to spy the quarterback, and he can't get out of the pocket. And if he starts to escape, you got to track him down. So I think definitely personnel-wise, I do think this defense is more equipped to stop mobile quarterbacks. I just think they're faster overall. I think they have safeties that can get to the ball a little bit quicker. I think there's more speed at the linebacker position. And then obviously I think there's just projecting there's going to be more sure tackling. As Buda Alukta could get to the place last year, could get to the ball, but the tackling was just such a mess for him for the first part. He was good the last half of the season tackling, and obviously he was a great playmaker, but there's a lot of occasions where you look at the tape and, he gets to a play, he blows it up, but he misses the tackle. So I think that's going to be huge too. Can Franzel offset that? And the numbers show that he was a pretty sure tackler at South Dakota State. So I think he's going to be the key to stopping Wood. And then, it sounds simple, but just get pressure. I mean, he looked good in the bowl game, but he hasn't played a lot of college football. It's been a few snaps here or there. Maybe come in for a gadget play or two outside of that bowl game. So I think you get pressure in his face, he's going to, I don't want to say crumble, but I think he's going to get happy feet. And then you get a guy like that who's going to be a lot more willing to move outside the pocket. You get him off his spot, and then you can start to, even play off that when you flush him out, have guys there and ready.
I think if they're able to, if he does flush, if he does run out of the pocket, I think what the Cougs will try to do is force him to more the outside, where a guy like Caleb Franzel might be waiting, Matt Durant, Tucker Large, and Kale Reeder. You mentioned to me the sure tackling. I have some numbers to give you here. I might be the world's biggest PFF fan, as Jake Dicker actually noted in a media availability last year. So PFF actually gives you missed tackled numbers, and I'm going to give you the total missed tackles for who we think will start at safety for WSU. All right, Tucker Large last year missed 6 total tackles, including 1 in his last 7 games. So that says something. Matt Durant missed a total of 9 tackles last season, including just 2 in his last 8 games. And then Kale Reeder missed most of the season last year. So you go back to 23, which was his last full year, 8 total missed tackles the entire year. Now, I think if you were a WSU coach and you could have transformed any position group over the last couple of years to make that better, I think the number 1 pick would have been the safety group. And, we're asking, them to make a jump here in terms of competing at the FBS level. And we think they can, but I think the first, what they will improve the most out of the safety group is just making better tackles, trusting them to make the tackle, and trusting them to be in the right spot. So I think if they can force Wood to flush to the outside, escape to the pocket to the outside, they will be in a much better spot than if he's, escaping up the middle and, missing tackles or forcing missed tackles that way. So I think that's kind of where they hope he will go if they are not able to contain him.
And I'll add, too, I pulled up PFF as well.
There you go.
Franzel in his career, so we're talking a career. Now, granted, he was mostly a rotational player until last year, but in his career, he missed 18 total tackles.
Really?
So far. That's how many Alukta missed last season. Now, granted,
yeah.
like 7 in the last 7 games. It got a lot better. I mean, he missed 2, 5, 9, 12, 14 in the first 5 games, and then just 4 in his last 7, actually. So after the Genty baptism, he was actually pretty solid. But I think I think as we watched that, it was an issue at times last year where he would get to the spot and he'd miss. And I think the hope is, based on what the numbers show, Franzel will be able to get to those same spots but finish the tackles.
Correct. Yeah, I think we are in agreement on that. I think they're going to be, maybe the strength of the entire defense moving forward, not just on Saturday. So we feel pretty good about that position group. What I want to touch on with Idaho is just some of the inexperience on the defensive side. They are pretty inexperienced in their secondary. I'm gonna go through some of the guys that are at the top of their depth chart that are projected starters. So we have one of their safeties is Matt Irwin, who has 7 games at UI, has not started a game yet. Their other safety is going to be Hayden John, who has played in 17 total games at UI, also has not started a game.
Matt Irwin, by the way, I got PFF up 53 snaps on defense.
There you go.
Hayden John, 130 over 2 years.
There you go. So, yeah, still not very much meaningful action for either of those guys. And then one of their starting cornerbacks is Caleb Ricks, who is a true freshman. So you're asking a lot of him to match up with guys like, Jeremiah Noga, Devin Ellison, and Josh Meredith at WSU. The one cornerback that might ring a bell for Coug fans is, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Jamel Blendman.
Nailed it.
Perfect. And he started his career here at WSU, went in JUCO, and now is in his 3rd year with the Vandals. And so he has obviously, like I said, been around the block. He's probably their most experienced guy in the secondary. So it's not a total, it's not a total, vast inexperience for the Vandals at the secondary spots.
199 snaps for Blendman at the FCS level. He went by the name of this, and he's given up action. I'm looking right now: 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, no PBUs, according to PFF. And I'll just add with Caleb Ricks, if that name sounds vaguely familiar, his brother Eli plays for the Eagles. He was at, I think, Alabama and LSU. So
is that where that comes from? Because I could have sworn I was like having deja vu.
No, that's his brother. That is Ricks's. That is Caleb Rick's older brother is Eli Ricks. So there's certainly some genes in there, but I think you look at Blendman too, and look, there's more to football than size, right? You have small corners who are good, but 5'9", 190 pounds. You match him up with a Devin Ellison or a Jeremiah Noga. You have to think that favors Washington State.
Right, and I'm so glad you said that because I think that is a theme that applies to other parts of the Idaho defense as well. I'm going to go through their starting 2 DTs and starting 2 DNs and just a list.
And I'll mention the snaps after you.
Okay.
I will, yeah.
We're in a good rhythm here. This
is
great.
Yep.
Okay, so one of the starting DNs is, hope I'm getting his name right again, Matthias McLean, who is listed at 6'4", 255. Okay. The other DN is going to be Donovan Parham, who is 6'3", 230. And then going over to DT, we have Mitch, I'm going to butcher this, Jaskawiak, listed at 6'3", 265. And then last but not least, veteran DT, Zach Krotzer, one of their captains, 6'2", 270. So you have 2 guys that are 6'3", 164, 162. And I think some of that size will probably win them a lot of games in the FCS level.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be great. You match up against a WSU offensive line where you have 6'7", 6'5", 6'3" with Brock Dew, and then 6'2" or /6'5" with Noah Dunham and AJ Lapulu, and then 6'5" with Christian Helborn. I think there's some pretty clear advantages there for WSU.
Well, and then you get into the weights. 265, 270 matched up against, I think, an entire line or close to of guys who are 300 pounds. And again, and it's important to know, and I said this with Blendman too, there is more to it than size, right? You can't just, say, oh, they're bigger, it's going to work. But there is some science to it. When you have a guy like, a 265-pound offensive or defensive tackle going up against someone like Brock Dew, who's, a 5-year veteran, or going up against, Johnny Lester, who's 306 pounds, or AJ Vaipulu, who's 302 and is a long-term veteran. You get to the outside, you get the 250-pounders against a guy like Ashton Tripp, who's 6'7", 303, but has the quickness that you need to play out there. And then just looking at the snaps, McLean played 97 snaps last year. Parham played. Parham's actually pretty experienced. He's a transfer from Mississippi Valley State. He's got over 900. He's got exactly 900 snaps, 19 pressures last year. Granted, that's at Mississippi Valley State's at a pretty low level of FCS. Who are the other 2 guys you said? Who are the tackles?
We have Zach Krotzer and Mitch Jaskawiak. Hope I'm saying his name right.
So Krotzer, as you mentioned, so he's a returning starter, 734 snaps, 491 last year, and then Mitch. I got him. Mitchell Jaskawiak. Yeah, that sounds right. 91 career snaps. So there are a couple guys, Parham and Krotzer, who have played considerable college football. But then you talk about again. McLean and Jaskawiak, again, there's just not a lot of experience there.
Right, and I think just thinking about this, taken all together, I think this puts a little bit of pressure on the Idaho defense to create a turnover or two.
Yeah.
I don't think that I don't think they can. I mean, we're both probably going to pick the Cougs in the end, but I think if they win this game, they have to. They can't just get off the field on third down after a 10 or 11 play drive from WSU that ends in 3 or 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at this game and you look at the 2022 game and how Idaho was able to stick around, it was the turnovers. They forced 3 fumbles. One of those was a scoop and score by Marcus Harris on Donovan Ollie. And I think even then, though, they fell short. And now, granted, Idaho threw 2 interceptions, including one to lose the game. Deion Henley had a pick on the goal line. But, I think if Idaho is going to win this game, they're going to have to force a few turnovers. And then on the other side, they're going to have to be pretty flawless. They're going to have to steal possessions in there somewhere. Because I think if you just go drive for drive, possession for possession, I think it is hard at least on paper for Idaho to match Wazoo in that way.
Really quick on that, I want to get your take on this because you obviously in 22, I was not here yet. Do you think this is a hard thing to predict going into a first game of the season with a team of 74 newcomers, but when you look back to that 22 team and compare it to what we think the 25 team will become, do you think this team is better or worse equipped to avoid those types of turnovers that they had at 22?
On paper, I'd say better. I think you had Cam Ward, who was very fresh into his FBS career. That was his first FBS game. He didn't throw any interceptions in that game, so important to note. But he also, as we saw in those first few games, was very susceptible to doing so. I also think that was a Pac-12 team. So that was a team who, whether they want to admit it or not, looked at Idaho as a lesser opponent. They were a 4-7 the year before. It was X first game. I think that they probably took that game lightly. They had Wisconsin the following week. That was probably, all right, let's get this game over with. We can show up half energy and win. I don't think you're going to have that with this team. I think part of that is, obviously, it's not Power 5 anymore, so it's a step lower in Group of 5, whatever you want to call it. But it is a different status than when you were in the full-blown Pac-12. You're also talking about a coach who's coming from South Dakota State. So he has been at the FCS level. He has seen these games. He has seen his team win these games. And I think the same is for a lot of the players. You look at Large and Franzel and Balloon and Durant and Reeder and so on, even Zevi Eckhouse if he's the quarterback. These guys all played at the FCS level. So to them, FCS isn't a step down. That's where they started. That's where they springboarded. And I think a lot of them have something they want to prove that, that they're capable of playing at a higher level. So I think the team is going to be more focused than they were in 2022. I think focus was a crucial issue.
Jamey, you have unintentionally plugged a recent story of mine in the paper about players feeling whether or not they feel like they need to prove themselves at this higher level, and a lot of them were kind of I'd rather just prove myself to my teammates and prove myself that I'm right, that I can play at this higher level. But I think just speculating, there has to be a little bit of hey, we were just there not that long ago at all, and we know what it, we know that, these types of games, the FCS team might get up a little bit more than they would for, a regular conference game. So I think that's part of it, and I think that'll figure pretty prominently into this one as well. All right, we're going to move on now for the last segments here, just about, looking at the season overall. This is probably, you know this better than me because you've been here for a million years. This has to be maybe the wackiest schedule in WSU history. Now, you go back to 1920, they were playing, the Spokane YMCA. That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about a schedule that looks, it's something out of, CFP 26 with, playing at North Texas, at Ole Miss, at Virginia, playing one opponent twice in a span of 4 weeks. The question that I want to tackle here for our last segment is, what do we think makes a successful first year for WSU under Jimmy Rogers? My take, and I'll open it up to you in just a second. My take is I think they're capable of more, and maybe we'll look back and be like, wow, what an idiot, Greg. I think what would make a successful first year, in my opinion, is getting to a bowl. I think if you can keep that bowl streak going, I think, like I said, they might be. I'm sure that they are capable of more, but I think it's just such a really tough schedule. I mean, back-to-back weeks on one on the East Coast, one in the South at Ole Miss. Playing Oregon State twice at James Madison, which is nothing to sneeze at, especially traveling that far for that game. Those are tough games to win. Now, can they win them? Without a doubt. I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm not trying to discount that possibility whatsoever. I just think that those are tough games to win for anybody. It could be Oregon State. It could be whoever else. That is a tough environment to walk into, especially on a back-to-back basis in the case of Ole Miss and Virginia. So I think if they can get to 6-6, I think if they can keep the bowl streak going, that's something to be proud of. Now, if that's where they find themselves, after on November 30th, after the regular season, they might feel like they could have accomplished more. But I think down the line, 5 years down the line, they look at kind of what they had to work with 74 newcomers, really weird schedule, a first-year head coach at this level. I think that would make a successful first year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think, I think if you can get yourself those extra practices, get yourself into a bowl game, get 6-7 wins, again, I think the coach would say, no, that's not good enough. And in their defense, they've known nothing besides 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 win seasons. But I think if you can get yourself 12 wins, 6 or 7.
Wow.
I mean, 12 wins would be great. That would certainly be a success. If you can get yourself 6 or 7 wins, get those extra bowl practices, get to a bowl game, I think you're feeling pretty good.
Without a doubt. Yep. Jamey, I think that's about all the thoughts I have for this one. Is there anything you want to add as we kind of wrap up here?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, for the first time, Jamey has run out of things to say in his life, so I think that's a good spot to end it at.
Not wrong.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Like I said, we will be moving to a Monday schedule for the rest of the season. So look for these on Mondays. This will be on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you guys next time.